Hello again. Welcome to a new episode of the First World Manila podcast. That you just heard the original national anthem of the Philippines, which was in Spanish. I am your host, Ramon Rodrigo Roberto Calao Cuenca, CFA. First World Manila, for anyone just joining, is a podcast talking about fixing or solving sort of the deep-rooted issues, whether it's cultural, social, economic, that our country needs to overcome to really develop and have a higher standard of living for everybody. And today is a special episode. I am joined. This is my first guest ever on the podcast, so maybe it's a sign we're moving forward. Maybe you can introduce yourself.
Okay, I'm glad to be here, Rodrigo. I'm Joffre Balce. I'm the Secretary of the Association for Good Government. To introduce also my organization, we're a 118-year-old non-stock, non-profit educational institution, foundation, specializing in an education on political economy that does social justice. We're based in Redfern, New South Wales, Australia. And we've been existing for that long. We're probably one of the best kept secrets in Sydney.
Okay, so you might notice people are watching on YouTube that the setting's a bit different. I'm recording during the day. Normally I record at night because it's very quiet, but since we're here, and I apologize in advance for the noise. We're recording in someone's office elsewhere during the day, so it's a bit noisy. And we're splitting one microphone because this is a very much a startup. I want to call it a startup, not a budget, but a startup podcast. Just making do with what we have, and we speaking a bit louder so that everyone can hear us. But we tested this earlier, so it should be okay. Anyway, so what Joffrey wants to talk about is obviously his background, his experiences, his thoughts on the Philippines, and I guess we'll just take it from there and just talk about whatever you want. The great thing about podcasts is that you can just pause and even if it's longer, you can pause and come back to it later on. So we can just kind of talk about maybe what your strongest points are, and then just take it from there.
Okay, well, maybe as a background, I finished my Master's of Science in Industrial Economics at the University of Asia Pacific, which was then in 1987 the Center for Research and Communication.
Wow.
And 2 years after I graduated, I moved to the Philippine Deposit Insurance Corporation. My official title when I joined was a technical assistant to the president. But my function was really being the chief economist of the Philippine Deposit Insurance Corporation at the time. Yeah. And,
wow. So someone who knows what he's talking about. So lucky for you, dear listener. You're listening, instead of listening to me, just you're listening to someone who has some real world experience.
Yeah. And my thesis was on logit analysis on commercial bank failures in the Philippines.
Commercial bank failures. Wow.
Yes. So I studied the history of commercial banking failure in the Philippines and made a probability model.
Wow.
And I guess that's what got me the job as well.
Fantastic. So before you go on, just because some of our audience isn't from a finance background like you or I, but basically the banking system is very important to a country because that basically it helps basically control where the money goes or who gets the money and how the money is distributed, how it's created, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, we're not going to give an economics lesson right now, but suffice it to say that this sort of policy is very important. And maybe we can. The more we talk about it, we'll just add lib and try and explain things and make it more digestible for people as well.
The allegory we can use for a financial system is the circulatory system of the body. That's why they call they refer very much to liquidity in the financial system, but also capital, the formation of capital markets. So we can discuss a little more about that.
Yeah, I think we should because I think the word capital gets thrown around quite a bit, and there's more than one definition for it. So when we reach that part, we should give a little primer as to what capital is, how it's distributed.
That would be good.
Yeah. So anyways, you can go on anything you want to start with?
Okay, so I guess it's a good thing you mentioned capital.
Okay.
Adam Smith mentions 3 factors of production.
Okay.
Land, which is created by nature,
Yeah.
including the resources. Then there is labor, labor is the exertion of human effort
Right.
applied to nature, and capital is actually what is saved in excess of consumption.
Yeah, and just to jump in here, for those who don't know, Adam Smith is considered the, what do you call him, the grandfather, the godfather,
the
or
father of
economics, basically. So, and it's interesting because he was actually a moral philosopher, am I correct? If I'm not
Yes,
mistaken.
he was a philosopher and a legal scholar.
Yeah, in the England in like the 1700s.
Yeah, in Scotland.
In Scotland, sorry. Yes, the Scottish
Yeah.
School of Economics. I'm sorry. So I'm sorry for all the Scottish listening to
No.
this podcast. You know, I get viewers from like different countries
Yes.
or listeners, but I'm not sure if they're actual like foreigners
Uh-huh.
or if they're like Pinoys living abroad.
Yeah.
I know some of them are foreigners because someone actually,
Mm.
someone from Ireland actually contacted me about this because he was.
Oh.
You know, it's funny because I have, you know, there are a lot of foreigners who love this country and want to see it succeed. So, you know, it's very
Yes.
heartening to hear that. But anyways, so Scottish Adam Smith, Scottish economist, the father of economics, and basically, I mean, his writings help really establish his field, and it's very important because how do you define economics actually? At its most basic.
It's the most basic. I would. The textbooks would give a lot of definitions. The essential definition in the textbooks is the production distribution of scarce resources to satisfy human wants and needs.
Yeah.
But it's essentially a science of decision making as to dealing with the basic questions of what to produce, how much to produce, for whom to produce, and how to distribute it. Keeping in mind economics as those basic principles, we can proceed from there.
Yes.
So I did mention three fundamental factor inputs in an economy: land, which includes natural resources; labor, which is human exertion; and capital is what is saved. So Adam Smith was famous for a book entitled The Wealth of Nations. And a lot of capitalists would say, oh, Adam Smith is our idol.
Mhm.
But if you ask them the question, all right, if he is your idol, what is the source of the wealth of nations in his book? A lot of them wouldn't be able to answer it.
It's I actually had to read some of it for college when I was in Chicago. It's a very thick book.
Yes, it is.
And it's written in a very archaic style.
It's a cure for insomnia.
Yes. So, you know, my issue too with these classic texts, especially in economics, whether it's The Wealth of Nations or Das Kapital, is that the way they're written is very, you know, it's very, I wouldn't say flowery, but it's definitely in a style that's not used anymore too. So
Very verbose.
yeah, it's very verbose, and a lot of things I feel are open to interpretation in some ways and misunderstanding as well.
Including the invisible hand.
Yes, yeah, that it tends to. So we'll talk about the invisible hand later on. But anyways, go on. You were talking about Wealth of Nations.
Yes. And the answer, if you'll check the book out, is labor.
Yeah, labor.
And some people say, no, it's a specialization of labor. Yes, that's the extension of how to make labor more effective. Because prior to Adam Smith, there were two contending schools of political economy at the time. One was the mercantilists and bullionists, who says the source of wealth of our nation is its businessmen and its ability to accumulate bullion.
Okay.
On the other hand, there were economists called the physiocrats, who said no, the source of the wealth of the nation is land and nature.
Okay.
And here comes Adam Smith saying no, it's labor, because in the first place, have you seen nature produce wealth for itself?
That's interesting. I never thought about it that way.
Right.
Yeah.
And in terms of capital, have you actually seen capital having arms and legs and doing the work for you?
And so when you say capital, what exactly do you mean by capital? Can you?
Capital would be what you produce in excess of what you need to consume to survive with dignity as a human being.
So would that be in the form of cash, for example, or other assets?
Cash is not the only one, but
Yes.
it's like the PC and the mic we're talking into right now. This
Right.
is capital.
I
The
see.
desk it's on is capital. The building we
Right.
have is capital. But make it distinct from the land the building is on.
I see. Okay. All right. Go
Now,
on.
so, uh, capital will take those forms, including money. People normally, especially in the Philippines, say, kulang ako sa kapital, or I lack capital, which means I lack money.
Yeah.
No, but money is only one form of capital. In fact, it is not the essence of capital.
So this is I want to make this important because a lot of people. It's true that a lot of people tend to think of capital as just money. I mean, you hear about capital markets, for example, where people raise money for investments. But
Yeah.
capital also, in economic terms, means other things other than just cash. So if you guys and girls can just keep that in mind. Anyways, go on.
Yes. And one thing about capital is if you leave it alone, if you don't touch it, it actually deteriorates. It
Really?
Depreciates.
That's true. Depreciation.
Yes. So capital requires labor to make it productive, to prevent it from depreciating, and actually in the end appreciating.
Okay.
So we have to keep those things in mind. Also in terms of land, we can make it more beautiful,
Mhm.
make it more livable,
Mhm.
make it more productive using the right technology.
Yes.
But we can also ruin it.
Okay.
You can imagine, like, say, what happened in Marinduque after mining the island
Yeah.
and leaving mercury-infested waters in a well. It
Yeah.
suddenly breaks and poisons the fish, which destroys the other source of livelihood for the island.
Right.
So
Okay.
it's important the use of labor to enhance the value of nature, of land, and capital has to be the aim of economics.
The use of labor to enhance the value of land and capital.
Yes.
So okay, that's interesting. So you're using one input to enhance the value of the two other
Yes.
inputs. Am I correct with
Yes.
the economy? That's very interesting. So I'm curious where you're going to go with this. Anyways, please
Yeah,
go on.
and you need work is essentially human intervention,
Yes.
right? So these are the problems that we deal with in terms of our environment.
Hmm.
I believe that the argument over climate change, whether we're experiencing climate change or not, might be missing the whole point.
Really?
Yes, because I think the whole point, the whole economic problem is when we take from the environment, are we improving it? Are we enhancing it? Or are we letting it deteriorate?
Right.
So I would apply the old Boy Scout rule. If you break something, you fix it.
Yes.
If you make a mess, you clean it up yourself.
Yes. Okay.
And if you take something, put it back. And the Boy Scout, the Boy Scout principle of leaving a place as if you were never there,
You know,
but being
yeah.
better than when you found it.
I'm reminded. So a lot of viewers are fans of Japan. So
Uh-huh.
I'm kind of reminded of Japan, for example. It's so clean and pristine
Yes.
there. There's a sense of, responsibility. So just jumping in there. But anyways, go on.
Yeah, there's respect for the environment,
Yes. Yes.
an appreciation for it.
Yeah.
Because it's even in human relations. If you don't appreciate someone, you
Yeah.
lose that.
Yes. Yeah.
And same thing with capital.
Hmm.
The objective really is to enhance capital.
Yeah. Okay.
But what's important, in order to enhance capital, you have to treat your labor right.
So to enhance, an example of enhancing capital would be like fixtures on a building, even
Yes.
a better PC, like you're saying, a better
Yeah.
mic,
Yes.
a mic that can handle more people speaking instead of just.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
It's actually it's requiring less human effort,
Yes.
being able to produce more in less time.
Yes.
But it's also should be designed not to make life harder for the worker,
Right.
but
yeah.
make it easier.
There should be dignity and obviously a well-paid and well-treated worker. All other things equal,
Yes.
will produce better results.
So if a capitalist is truly a disciple of Adam Smith,
Yes.
he should be aware that you should not treat your laborers like crap.
Yeah. Yeah.
You must value them. You must
Yes.
enhance their productivity and even enhance their dignity and lives.
Yes. Yeah.
But the question also, the philosophical question there is it the employer's
Mhm.
responsibility to provide for the subsistence of the worker?
That is good. Good question.
Yeah, it's a difficult question.
Well, I mean, workers theoretically earn a wage, right? So then,
Yeah.
are you providing for their living in that sense?
It's related to that question. Is it the duty?
Is it the duty? Yeah.
Is it the duty of the employer, of their boss,
Right.
to provide for their sustenance?
Okay.
And the second question also would be, what are wages, therefore? Is it an advance of the capital of the capitalist,
Okay.
the employer,
Right.
that he has to get back?
I see.
Or is it a draft representing the worker's output, his fruits of labor?
I see.
So
Okay.
those are crucial questions in developing, I would say, a fair economic framework.
I see. That's so interesting. So who has the rights to to the product of the laborer's labor?
Yeah.
Is it the capitalist or the worker?
Right.
Okay, that's interesting.
And I'd like to advance our perspective to and I usually use this as a Australian story.
Yeah.
Imagine three Aussies enter a bar.
Right.
Yes, and when they enter the bar, the cost of a beer is this is an old story. So $5 a schooner.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah.
a big glass, right?
Right.
And one of the friends volunteers to buy it from the bar so that the two can reserve the table for them, right?
Right. Right.
So he goes to the bar, and when he gets to the bar, he sees a special, a picture that serves 4.5 schooners of beer,
Mm-hmm.
but at the cost of $12.
Okay.
So with the synergy of his three companions,
Right.
he could save $3 and gain 1.5 extra schooners of beer.
Right. Okay.
Now, question: to whom the schooners of beer, extra schooners of beer, and the $3 belong?
Okay. Well, for me, I would say after that exchange, the schooners of beer belong to the people, the guys that were ordering it, and the payment belongs to the restaurant.
Yeah, well, the $3 in savings.
Oh, sorry, savings.
Right?
Yeah,
Who
yeah.
does it belong?
Oh, sorry, it's on the savings. Sorry. Well, it still belongs to the
To
yeah.
the people,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So, the Aussie thing to do, the fair dinkum they call it,
Right.
thing to do, is to return the dollar to each and
Yeah.
bring the schooner, the picture, the
Yes,
jug,
yes.
and share it properly,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Probably
yeah.
one extra half
Right.
schooner of beer for each.
Right.
That's the fair thing to do.
Right.
So the surplus,
Mhm.
the synergy generated by that cooperation
Mhm.
belongs to everyone.
Yes.
But the money spent to buy it also comes from everyone. So the savings must return to everyone.
Yeah. Okay.
That's a just economic model, right?
Right.
Now, imagine a fourth mate joining them for
right.
a beer.
Right.
What will they tell him to do? What's the Aussie thing to do? Tell him to buy his own beer for $5?
Yeah.
Charge him for the beer that they're giving him?
Right.
Or will they give it to him for free? It's our shout. The Aussie thing to do is, hey, it's our shout.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So this would be an allegorical representation of what would be called a universal basic outcome,
Yeah.
which some people also know as a universal basic income.
Yes. Okay.
So-
UBI, yes.
There are controversies in the universal basic income, in a sense that some believe that you should give money that is required for a dignified living
Yes.
to
Yeah.
all, and
Right.
leave them to spend it.
Right. Okay.
But there is also the school of thought, and that's where I belong, where you can use the surplus
Yeah.
to provide universal housing, universal healthcare, universal education, uh, thresholds for utilities and
Yeah.
transport, and even allowances for vouchers for education, continuing education even, and cultural enhancement, and then a stipend.
Okay, that's interesting. So, I mean, I know that there isn't, at least to my knowledge, there is no economy in the world right now that follows exactly what you said. But I do know some of that, basically some developed countries uh, do invest more than others in, education and healthcare, for example. I'm
Mhm.
thinking, I mean, Australia maybe, I mean, if you look at the quality of life rankings, Australia's ranks high there. I'm not sure how much they subsidize education and healthcare there, but you look at the European countries, some of them like I know the Scandinavian countries, all these countries tend to be high in the standard of livings, and the U.S. tends not to be there.
Yeah.
The U.S. is a model that, well, a form of the U.S. Maybe all of its negatives and none of its positives is what we have here in the Philippines. But yeah, it's something to think about. Like, and it's true. I think when you're born, some people are born more fortunate than others. But I mean, maybe healthcare should be a right to some like basic
Yeah.
form of healthcare should be a right to everybody.
Mhm.
So, but again, it obviously requires. But it's a fiscal part about it that
Yes.
that gets where everything gets complicated as well. So I think you'll talk more about that.
There's the fiscal issue. How
Yes.
do you raise the taxes?
Yeah, how do you raise taxes?
Well, you cited one country. I mean, there's some countries that address
Right,
that issue.
right.
I have a nephew and his wife working in Sweden,
Okay,
and when they moved from Madrid
yeah,
to there, and I said, "How much do you pay in taxes in Sweden?" I heard it's something like 65%.
yeah.
I said, "Yes, Tito." And so I asked, "So what makes you want to work in Sweden?" And he says, "We actually save more in Sweden." Why is that? Because the government gives us very little else to spend on.
Really?
Yes, I
Yeah,
mean,
healthcare is obviously taken care of.
healthcare, the rents are, I don't want to use this term subsidized, but provided.
Okay,
Uh, they actually are paid for their garbage when they segregate it.
right.
So they don't pay garbage collection fees.
Okay.
It actually helps lower their costs of energy.
Yeah, interesting.
And public transport is available, cheap. You would really prefer to take mass transit than to use your car.
Is it true though that in countries where healthcare is, well, Sweden's one of them. I think Spain too has like a healthcare that's available to everybody, or it's very
Yeah,
affordable.
yeah, but the other benefits that I mentioned
Right.
aren't there. Education also of the children.
Yeah.
Uh,
Some people say that the lines and hospital lines are super long. I don't know if that's true. Do you believe that or no?
yes, it could be because if the government itself does not provide adequate services for universal health care, you will have a lower quality of public health
I see.
and force people to spend on a higher quality as well. Like in Australia, I think there's a 6, 9, or 12-month waiting time for an eye operation.
Wow.
So
So it's a question of execution also. I mean,
Yeah.
basically there's so many moving parts that, and it's hard because I think you're right. I think because we're talking about building the economy for a country, and it's it's standard of living for people. There's so many moving parts, and it's very hard to articulate that into small sound bites if you're a politician.
yes.
I think, and that's why one reason why I like doing this podcast and doing other things, because like I feel that people and maybe you, the dear listeners, should think about that. There's so many moving parts of these things, and maybe seeing other points of view besides your own. So, it's interesting. Yeah. So like a policy that has to be basically comprehensive and take account of so many of everything basically.
Yeah.
So in economics, by the way. We call these things also externalities.
Okay.
Some of them, like the environment.
Yes.
Like, for example, or things that, I mean, maybe you can define it better. But my textbook understanding of externalities is that if you have a transaction between party A and party B, there's also an effect on the environment, party C, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If I had to boil it down.
Indirect, right.
Yeah, indirect. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why we go back to that model where there's land, labor, and capital.
Yes.
Right?
Okay, I see.
When society is properly organized
Right.
and they properly cooperate,
Right.
the value of land goes up.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And if they work together, capital naturally appreciates.
Yes.
So the key is in human intervention,
Okay.
like in the bar,
Right.
you produce a surplus, a kind of
Yes.
synergy.
Yeah.
Now the question is that synergy equitably returned to its sources?
Right.
Like, can you imagine if the third mate on the bar
Right.
pockets the dollars
Yeah.
and drinks the beer and gives
Yeah.
them each one schooner each, and he says, "Oh, what I've done was collect the rewards for my efforts."
Right.
I guess his friends will knock his head off and think,
Yeah.
"Oh, come on."
Yeah. Exactly. That's obviously an allegory for corruption.
Yes, yes. And doesn't that happen
Yeah.
in terms of political economy? There are surplus values generated by society
Yeah.
that are pocketed.
Yeah.
Or there sometimes, here's another interesting allegory. Imagine have you gone to a free concert, right?
Yeah.
Free concert, if you want the spot that you want, what do?
Yes.
You arrive early, right?
Yes.
So you invest time,
Yeah.
more time for the place that you want,
Mm-hmm.
and less time for the place that you'll have to settle for,
Yeah.
right? So there is a sense of equity when you do that.
Right. Right.
You reward the person for arriving early,
Yes.
and you also have to respect people who arrive before you by not blocking their view and squeezing yourself
Yeah.
into those gaps, right?
Yeah. And it's funny because this seems to work, and I'm kind of crossing or like leaving one foot in the economic sphere, but another one to like the social/cultural sphere is like, why is it that in some countries that sort of idea is more doable than in others? It seems to me, just based on my observations, there's in some countries there's more of a greater respect for the community than in others.
Yes. It's part of it would be the education,
Right.
the mores that's encouraged, and also the examples they see from its leaders. Both political and economic, industrial leaders.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
let's use a Filipino example, for instance.
Okay. Sige.
When you see traffic caused by a bottleneck of, let's say, 2 or 3 cabs and jeepneys and tricycles, you'll
Yeah.
say
Yeah.
those guys are blocking progress, right?
Yes. Yes.
But when you see infrastructure monopolies, oligopolies,
Yes.
causing the traffic, what do? Oh, you admire them. And
Yeah.
that is, I think, ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, they are the upper echelon counterparts of the taxi driver, the jeepney driver, and the tricycle, trying
Yeah.
to pull one over the other and
And-
causing a whole traffic jam.
And this is something that I talk about often, and I continue to talk about in this podcast, is that because a lot of my listeners are from the upper classes, like we have to set an example for the rest of society. And I know, I mean, for me growing up, for example, like a lot of people, because I went to IS, like there is no sense. I mean, they're children or teenagers, but there's still no sense of a progress towards a sense of leadership. It always tends to be, here I am, I'm just gonna, take it easy, then go find a job in the U.S. and live in the U.S. So, for me, that's sort of like for the. So, how can you set an example for respect for this community if you just don't do anything to help here and also leave as well?
Yeah.
And I know some people leave because they have to find jobs, so I don't blame them for that. But there are some people who just who are of means, who I feel we collectively should take a bigger responsibility in this, because you're right. I think everyone likes to talk about the politicians.
Mhm.
I mean, they're kind of their own thing, but everyone else is from, like, I guess, because you mentioned from the other other spheres, the upper echelons from other spheres, like
Yeah.
if there's economic or social or cultural. Like, I think we have to take a stand as well. You know, we
Yeah.
have to. We have to practice what we preach. Otherwise, who's going to follow us?
Mhm.
So if you're from a more privileged background, you should think about it that you in a sense you are born into a sense of leadership for the community, leadership in Philippines. You know, like
Yeah.
I think historically I feel like on a national level that tends to be missing. So I think
There's a
Yeah.
term, there's a French term for that, noblesse oblige.
noblesse oblige. There we go.
Right.
Yeah, yeah,
You are obliged, your nobility obliges you
yeah.
to provide the example
Yes, exactly.
and not to oblige others to treat you as nobility.
Yes.
That's the wrong idea of noblesse
Yeah.
oblige. I oblige you to recognize my nobility. That is totally a misuse and abuse of noblesse oblige.
Yeah, so that's that. So there you go. I mean, and that's. I mean, just on my own thinking, and like I've kind of laid my thought process out throughout the past few episodes of this podcast. But yeah, it comes down. That's one of the things it comes down to is that like you're obliged to serve, or
Yeah.
you know that's what's noble, but not people to recognize you, because that if you look at our culture now, that tends to be what it is, right?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, the infrastructure monopolies, etc. It's one thing, the political is another, but even in the social spheres where many of us are, like, you know, people like to put their license plates, they put like lawyer or you know, or doctor. I mean, maybe not doctor, but like, or like all these society, you know, magazines. And I'm not harping on any society magazines, but I always feel like the society shouldn't just be because you were born that way. I mean, there should be some sense of service or to the country. So go on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go back a little more to other examples of how an economy should work. They talk about user pays, right?
Yes.
You get what you pay for. If
Yes.
you pay a low price, you deserve less service.
Yes.
But try applying that in a Sydney bus system,
Okay.
where the pensioners and the disabled pay very low fares,
Mm-hmm.
and have special areas in the seat. If we will apply user pays, then I, as a fully paying market fare paying passenger, can tell the senior citizen to get off their seat because I paid the full fare.
Yeah.
That just isn't correct.
Yeah.
So, and that is one of the my basic criticisms of user pays.
Yes.
My other criticism of user pays is going up the lift.
Yes.
If we were to apply the same fare system to the lift, they should be charging passengers depending on where they get on and off
Mhm.
in the building, right?
Yeah.
And that would be a how do you call it? An administrative nightmare,
Right.
right? But why can we afford to ride the lifts for free?
Yeah.
It's because the tenants or owners of the units of the building
Right.
pay a strata fee.
So would you call like for the lift your example and for the bus example, would you call those things public goods?
Yes.
Okay.
Public goods as defined as what society and the public wants and
Yeah,
needs,
right.
but no single provider can afford to give it. Can
Yeah.
deliver.
But would you differentiate that from, say, like a luxury company like a Louis Vuitton or an Apple?
Now that would be more because you have that choice,
Yeah.
and it's not an essential.
I see. Yes. Yeah.
Like personally, I'm depends on where I go. I wouldn't want to wear luxury branded items because you're a moving target for criminal elements.
Right.
But when it comes to public goods, they are necessary for you to live a dignified urban or
Yeah.
civilized life, like mass transit.
Yes.
So, applying that model, that microeconomic model on the building,
Right.
Imagine it, instead of being applied vertically, you apply it horizontally.
Interesting. Okay.
Land value taxes work that way.
Okay.
If you apply land value taxes, you can actually provide the basic infrastructure and public works as society and civilization needs,
Right. Right.
and and more.
Okay.
Uh, and there is proof of that. And
Okay.
this is where I introduce the name of Henry George. The Henry George effect of Joseph Stiglitz. He wrote a paper with another economist in 1977-78.
Okay.
And he demonstrated something that's quite easy to prove,
Right.
that values of land grow by a multiple of the public works
Mm-hmm.
and infrastructure built over them.
Okay.
Uh,
That's true.
And very many cases in point. Look at what the expressways have done.
Yeah.
It raised the value of real estate
Right. Right.
here in the Philippines.
Yes, of
In
course.
in London, to give even more concrete examples, the cost of the Jubilee line that was built for the Olympics
Yeah.
is about £3.5 billion.
Okay.
An awesome amount, right?
Yes. Yes.
But real estate around that infrastructure went up by as much as 10.5 to 12 billion pounds, which shows that land values are more than enough to pay for the infrastructure and more,
Okay.
and maybe even provide cheaper fares. So, to the neoliberal capitalists out there, don't call the passengers parasites, or in Tagalog, palamunin.
Okay.
They're not the palamunin. They are entitled to that. The traffic goes to the malls to become patrons, right?
Yes.
And so, who are the palamunin in this case? Those who are not paying the right land value taxes for the benefits derived from the infrastructure and the public works.
So, playing devil's advocate,
Yes, please.
I'm a businessman,
Yeah.
and a lot of people who listen are business people. I mean, they do care about this country, but how when people hear taxes, you know,
Yes.
is there a way to pitch it to them, the business people? Where, I mean, obviously, I mean, for in my experience, it depends how it's sort of done in a way
Yeah.
that's in a way that they're free to pursue profit, but
Right.
also obviously we want, you know, a lot of people do want, you know, transportation and roads. Just because, again, and I just want to make this clear, like, I don't want to make these things a black and white issue. You know, you're either far to the left or far to the right. I think there's room for compromise on both ends. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I do agree with you that we have to understand what taxes are.
Yeah.
There is the notion that taxes are the legitimate act
Yeah.
of government getting its fair share
Right.
of economic activity.
Right.
Do you feel comfortable with that definition?
No, the government gets it. No, I don't.
Yes, but that is the common notion
Yeah.
in our schools.
Yes. Okay.
And I would say, no, that sounds like theft.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what if you say taxation is the collection of the commonwealth of a society
Okay.
to enhance the sources from which it came?
Right. Okay.
Then it makes more sense.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
the synergy, for example, the synergy formed by those three mates in the Aussie bar
Right.
belongs to the three, and their ability is enhanced to provide a free beer for a fourth friend coming in.
So how would, I mean, is there an example now in real life where this is sort of land value tax has worked? That you,
All right, this is something to explore.
Right.
Singapore is praised for charging very low income tax rates, and
Yes.
flat for all.
Right.
I believe before they started at 15,
Right.
and now it went down to 8.
You know, and just to jump in here, I used to work in Singapore, and I was taxed in the single digits, so
Yes.
it's pretty amazing. And for what I got there, you know, it's clean, it's safe. Public transportation is very good for the most part. It's just, and it's easy. It's actually easy to do business there.
Yes, and you prefer to to use mass transit and drive your car.
Yes, I actually prefer that. Exactly. Anyways, go on. Yeah.
Uh, do you know that the bulk of Singaporean government's revenue comes from land taxes?
I did not know that.
Well, how much did you pay in terms of your rent?
I paid quite a bit.
Yes, because
Yeah.
a lot of it went to the government.
I did not know that.
Now you know. Now you know.
Right. Right.
So that would be, let's say, over a third.
Right.
So the income taxes and other fees, the fines, etc.,
Right.
it's probably another third.
Right.
But
Right.
they also formed, out of their surplus, a sovereign wealth fund
Yes.
that earns interest.
Is it Temasek? Or
Temasek.
and the other one, G something. I can't remember. There's two of them.
Yeah, but there are but you can
Yeah.
imagine the concept of a
Yes.
sovereign wealth fund providing for the government.
Right.
And here's the other catch: because Singaporean workers are compelled to save,
Yes.
it multiplies the capacity of the sovereign wealth fund even more.
So what makes Singaporeans why are they obliged to save? Like why do they want to save?
Well, they are obliged to save so that it gives you a sense of empowerment that I have provided for my health care.
Right.
I have provided for the education of my children.
Right.
I have provided for my vehicle, which
Right.
is expensive to acquire.
Right.
Right?
So
and even I have helped to acquire the unit, the condominium unit that I'm occupying,
Yeah.
rightful to my station in life.
right. Right.
So
And their surplus capital
Yes.
is saved.
it's
So
they-
going back to what you're talking about at the beginning of this podcast.
yeah, so they have personal capital,
Yeah.
but also government social capital,
Right. Right. Okay.
forming a new synergy.
So bringing this to the context of the Philippines, I've read several places that we're not a society in general that likes to save. Well, why is that?
Well, when you have a country where you have, since for a long time, the number of poor people in the Philippines hovers over 20 million. Probably
Right.
it was 25 million.
Right.
Even if the poverty incidence has lowered, even marginally,
Right.
how can you expect people to save?
Yeah.
So that's the first problem.
Yeah.
Savings.
Right.
I mean, poverty. How can you expect the poor to save in the first place?
Right. Right.
Second is the ability to generate wealth remains concentrated in just a small group.
Right. Yeah.
There is no land reform.
Okay.
So those who are able to borrow from the banks are those who own land whose
Yeah.
values are appreciating because of the government's services and infrastructure and public works over them.
Right.
And when they invest, it grows even further, but it marginalizes
Right.
even more. So what's the other thing? What do they do if they can't provide jobs because they have protected interests?
Yes.
Like our power is, I think, second in cost to Japan.
Yes.
Energy intensive companies will not open shop in the Philippines.
Yes. Yeah.
In fact, you can find this out for yourself in Korea. A lot of Filipinos go there to work.
Really.
Yes, because they're willing to accept wages and conditions lower than what the Korean is willing to accept.
But higher than.
But higher than what they have in the Philippines. They're able to save and bring home
Yeah.
and remit their savings,
Yeah.
which they immediately use to buy a house because that gives them a sense of security.
Right.
But can that kind of strategy be sustained for long?
So because you're saying that in a way, the land prices here are increasing, but not because of like not because of productive activity.
Yes.
Within the borders of this country,
Mm.
it's exporting people, and they come back, and it's spent. It's not on land, and it's not really being saved. But
Well, that's part of the savings. That's
Oh,
part
yeah.
of the capital.
okay, so but investing in a house is savings in it.
Yes.
Okay, that's interesting because when I think of savings, and when a lot of people think of savings, they think of like cash in the bank.
Yeah.
What would you say? How would you define saving then compared to spending?
Well,
Like-
saving would be accumulating the capital that you need.
I see.
Now, this is a kind of sleight of hand in economics because what neoclassical economics did was clump land and
Right.
capital under capital.
Yes. Yeah.
The problem lies there in that land and capital are two distinct
Yeah.
inputs.
Yeah.
Land is produced by nature, which is
Yes.
practically free
Yes.
because even the birds aren't charged taxes and all that.
Right.
But
Right.
capital is what you produce with your labor, and that's what you are entitled to.
Yeah. Okay. I see.
So, but you need land to survive.
Yeah.
Therefore, what is needed is to guarantee people's rights to live on the earth with dignity.
Yes.
And that can be financed by the value of land if it's properly taxed and
Right.
monetized.
Aren't there land taxes here already though? Like.
It's real estate taxes are not land taxes.
Okay,
because
see,
it
I want-
includes
yeah.
a building.
Okay, so I want to make that distinction because
Yeah.
I mean because as far as I know, there is a real estate tax, but you're differentiating that from a land tax.
Yes.
So what is the difference, please?
The land tax is you're charging a tax based on the location of where you live and where you work.
Yeah.
So the posher areas would have to pay a higher tax amount,
Right.
but the rates are flat.
Okay.
Meaning, if you decide to be a farmer
Yeah.
and you have vast tracts of land,
Yeah.
but the value of land is cheap, you'll pay less taxes.
Yeah.
And you'll be encouraged to produce more.
Right. Yeah.
And that's the way to do it. And that's also, if you provide the right farm to market roads,
Yeah.
infrastructure,
Right.
your income will grow even faster than the land values, and you'll afford to be able to farm. And if the yield is poor, which means you've got a poor location,
Yeah.
then your taxes will likewise diminish.
Okay.
So it has to
So
be
there-
looked in terms of that way.
You have to look at all these different factors. It's
Right.
not just one thing. Okay. So would you say land tax is progressive? Like.
Oh yeah, I mean, the countries that applied the land tax reform
Yeah.
strategy,
Right.
which are Germany, Japan, Taiwan,
Right.
South Korea,
Right.
Singapore, their performance speaks for itself.
Yeah. So for me, and I agree with you that they're very smart in their taxation strategies and
Yeah.
implementation. But for me, I think the argument has to be when you sell this to people who own a lot of land here,
Mhm.
you have to. How do we package it so that you have to package so that they'll see their benefit as well?
Okay, we're not taking land away from them, for one.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it can work this way. If you want to own your land, that's fine.
Yeah.
If you're willing to pay taxes, we'll even do this.
Right.
You assess,
Yeah.
but on a condition that the government can buy the land
Mm-hmm.
based on your assessed value
Yes. Okay.
and pay you,
Right.
so that we can find someone else who will be willing to pay the right tax.
Pay off, yeah. And that reminds me too. So I did a podcast last year about Japan and their how they changed in one generation. And I remember that the government was paying off these landlords,
Yes.
these landowners too. So it's funny, but I feel like for that to happen, the other side of the transaction has to be clean, which means you have to trust the government to deliver on its promises.
Oh yes. The thing about the Japanese government was when the Meiji Restoration,
Yes.
the Meiji Constitution enshrined the equality of
Yeah.
the Japanese.
Yes.
You do not have to be born into the samurai class to
There
have a
we go.
military career.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You do not have to be a samurai class to have higher education.
Yeah.
Everyone can have higher education now.
Yeah.
So, and this brings us to the argument about authoritarian regimes.
Right.
Because some authoritarian regimes really don't perform well. Look at Africa, right?
Yes.
So
yes.
it's no guarantee.
It's none.
But what is characteristic of the authoritarian regimes that did work
Yeah.
is that they were strict to everyone, including friends and family.
Yes. Yeah.
The problem with other authoritarian regimes was they were strict with everyone except their friends and families.
Yeah.
And
yes.
that's where the problem begins. It's
Right.
not so much it's a choice between authoritarianism and democracy.
Yeah.
Because you can have democracy and an inequitable treatment in the eyes of the law, right?
Right. Yes.
But what's important is equitable treatment in the eyes of the law.
So yeah, and this is something that I talk about too. The sense of the impartial rule of law that's
Yeah.
equitable. Equitable is a key word. So for all the listeners out there, I want you to think about like these more deep rooted issues that we have to solve. I mean certainly the debates again between authoritarianism and democracy, parliamentary versus presidency. Those are important, but there are sort of deep rooted things,
Yeah.
which is basically the respect for the impartial rule of law and an effective justice system.
Mm-hmm. And
Yeah.
affordable, equitable.
Yeah.
You cannot say that the poor will be entitled to less counsel.
Yeah, the poor have to be. I mean, it should be equitable. Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, it should be fair to all parties. Exactly. But see, this is the problem that I run into too. Is that how do you get society? First of all, how do you have an efficient, impartial judiciary system? Branch of the government that really works for the good of this greater idea of a nation.
Okay, we've got a problem, and it's not just in the Philippines.
Right.
I think it's pretty much global.
Right.
It's the commercialization of the electoral system.
Really, commercialization.
Yes, when it's commercialized, politicians will say, "I invested in my position.
Right.
Therefore, I require a return on my investment."
Yeah.
And if they have campaign contributors,
Mhm.
they will owe their campaign contributors more than their voters
Yes.
because they perceive that their contributions bought votes. So
yeah.
they will serve their contributors before the voters.
Right. Yeah.
And when that happens, you do not have a democracy.
No.
You have a preference for the return on investment of the politician
Yes.
and the return on investment of the contributors.
Right.
And that's where the whole mess begins.
Really, that's interesting.
But if you decommercialize it, it'll work. I believe it'll work better than the anti-dynasty law.
Really.
Because my critique of the anti-dynasty law is this: in a democracy, you cannot discriminate anyone from a right that is equally entitled to all.
Yes.
Aspiring for public office is a universal right.
Yes.
Now, why will you disqualify someone on the basis of their pedigree?
Yes. Yeah.
It's wrong.
Right.
But if you say no, it will be a equal playing field. No one spends.
Yeah.
The window for campaigning is narrow.
Yeah.
Let's see. I would say that political dynasties might disappear overnight.
That's interesting. Because they don't owe money to the people who
Right.
back them.
Yes.
That's interesting. But how do you make the link between the commercialization of the political process and the reform of the judiciary branch?
Oh, when that happens,
I think it's important. Yeah.
Then politicians that are elected on the basis of equity
Yes.
will also want to apply the same equity to the justice system,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
So they will say, "Oh, how do we design a justice system? Maybe we should develop a jury system,
Okay.
and we have to design something quite unique to us because
Right.
some conflicts begin on the barangay level. I think most
Yeah.
of them begin on the barangay
Yes.
level.
Yes. Yeah.
So you can have, I would maybe not even call them courts, and
Okay.
and I think it's happening. You have community conflict resolution centers
Yes.
where there are arbiters, and those in conflict can choose a small jury
Yeah.
that's mutually accepted to both,
Yeah.
where they can present the facts,
Yeah.
not adversarial but facts,
Yeah.
not in an adversarial manner,
Right.
so that the jury can see the situation objectively
Yes.
and not necessarily decide whom to side with, but to provide a concrete solution to settle the conflict.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think if we do that from the barangay level, it'll solve probably 80% of legal cases in the Philippines.
Wow.
It's pretty much like what happened in China. I heard that the problem in China was that the major diseases were eye, ears, nose, throat.
Yeah.
And they traced the problem from dirty hands.
Right.
People were not washing with water and soap.
Yes.
So when they taught communities to wash with their hands with water and soap diligently,
Right. Yeah.
the incidence of ENT dropped.
Okay.
And
Wow.
that's a huge savings
Yeah.
for health.
Yeah. So just about it, jump in. So think about looking at the big picture. So I mean, it's hard too. I mean, it's good that we have people like you whose job it is to look at these things because, the problem is with a lot of people as well is that they're so busy
Yeah,
and they're just gonna hear sound bites.
yeah,
Well, thankfully you have podcasting now.
yeah.
So you can listen to this while you're folding your laundry or driving the car. If you're stuck in traffic, you can listen to this, right? But you can see that that are issues. There's sort of all these different things connecting to each other, and that's interesting that you're talking about judicial reforms from the bottom.
Yes.
It's interesting. Before I forget, do you believe in do you believe in the current form of how trials are run now? Should it be trial by jury or?
I believe more in the trial by jury.
Okay.
It's criticized in the Philippines saying the Filipinos are not ready for it
Right.
because of the high illiteracy rate,
Yes. Yes.
etc. But I'd say this will compel politicians to improve the literacy rate so
Yeah.
they can have better juries.
Okay. Interesting.
And as I said, it can work on the community level. If it works well in the community level, it will infect the hierarchy upwards, saying, okay, maybe this kind of system can be adapted and developed for the higher courts as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's the way it should begin.
Right. Interesting. So, and then I feel, and I always talk about the the judicial system because someone even told me like his observation of what someone told him is that like people here don't trust each other, and I think it's because we don't have like a really like super well functioning judicial system, where you can sort of rely on a sense of impartiality, which I think is missing from our society in general, is impartiality. So this is really important. I mean, for me, so starting from the bottom, that's very interesting. So like if you had to like, because for me it's like you have to kind of set something in motion so that you start with A, then A affects B, that affects C, D, E, F, G. So how would you start if you were given like a carte blanche, like how to fix this country, make it equitable for everybody? Like where would you start? What would be the easiest starting place where with the least amount of resistance, with the most amount of effectiveness, and you don't need to like get involved with politics or become a violent dictator or something?
That's a difficult question, but I think we have to work from where we are.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I, as an educator, I start with the very things I have in control of.
Yeah.
Designing courses,
Yeah.
delivering them, engaging my students.
Right.
And you'll never know where the torch you passed on will end up, right?
Yeah.
So it begins from where we are. If you're give a good profession, an accountant, an
Yes.
auditor, then develop better auditing and accounting methods that ensure objectivity, impartiality.
Yeah.
And then people may notice and say, hey, can you do that for us?
Yeah.
If you're, and this is quite difficult. You see, the problem is the commercialization
Yeah.
has spread to areas like academic research.
Really?
Well, grants are sponsored by corporations. It has extended to journalism.
Yes.
It has, well, of course, politics. And even, and this is a problem, when people are looking at post-political careers, I see
Yes.
that happening in Australia.
Okay.
They don't want to displease their prospective employers.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult to, especially under this system of commercialization, to think of how to reform from where they are, from what they are doing.
Yeah. So, and this is like I'm not trying to be an apologist for politicians or people in government, but I don't want to paint everyone with the same brush. But even if you want to change things in government, I mean, it's a system that's
Yes.
so And so my whole thing is that I talk about this in my last episode. I want to have a reform movement that develops a stronger sense of civil society.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's, for me, that's the way that's the starting point for reform, is that everyone's talking to each other. We have like a civic reform movement that exists outside of the government. You know, because just because like a lot of people in government, even if they care about the country, they're just stuck in like between a rock and a hard place. So I think there's and I'm excited now because the economy is doing somewhat well.
Yeah.
And we have all these technologies here that there can be a widespread civic reform movement among people of different, you know, socioeconomic backgrounds. We can all agree that we want this country to be better for everybody and to be fair. So, and yeah, I think you're right about starting from where you are. It's a good way to think about where you are, what you can do. I know that sounds very,
and maybe the next step is don't make it difficult for people who are actually trying to make a difference.
Yes,
Some people do it. I mean, even in the discourse in politics, when they find and I've experienced this, when people have a hard time arguing with you, immediately they'll paint the political color on you and say, you're a Duterte, or you're a Dilawan,
and I feel like I feel like that's unfortunately exacerbated by social media.
Yeah.
I mean, here's the thing: social media, because I'm using it, right?
Yes.
It's a neutral. I mean, it's a double-edged sword. I mean, we have to find a way that there's a proper way, like a sort of proper way to do things. You know, like you know how like people sometimes they won't treat each other in person the way they would in social media.
Yeah.
I think it's very difficult, but to police people. I mean, I'll leave it to Mark Zuckerberg and who runs Twitter. It's Jack Dorsey. I mean, I leave it to them. I mean, they have a big problem right now that they have to deal with, right? I mean, but they're billionaires, so they pay the price, right? They pay the price, right? So.
Hey, don't forget, they also received rich rewards.
Yes.
Because of their social media.
Yeah.
The cost and the time it takes to do market research is.
Well, the cost to produce and distribute this podcast, like I was telling you, is like nothing.
It's dropped. So we benefit from it. So have they.
Yeah. So, but I think there should be a coordinated, you know, civil movement.
Yeah.
And especially now, I mean, in the Philippines and all over the world, people are getting so polarized. Maybe, you know, that's something I want to start here in the Philippines and also maybe later on a global level, but here, because I'm living here right now. But it has to be, I don't think about that some more. But it has to be a place where people who are sort of outside of politics and are apathetic, like you have to make it, you know, interesting for them. Or
we may have to go deeper into the study of argumentation and logical fallacies.
Yes,
that's important, because painting someone with an insult when you can't argue back is what you call argumentum ad hominem. It's an attack on the person. It's not on the argument anymore. But because, let's say, someone has a higher stature than you and calls you a name, people say, yes, you are, because he said so. You totally lose the perspective. I'm not saying you lose the argument because you didn't win. No one won the argument. The perspective is lost.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. So for me, I think, because every episode I'm trying to develop like a game plan I want to put out for people. I think you're right about starting, like, first of all, changing mindsets and really developing a sense of civil society, and then treating each other with respect and not, you know, slandering each other right away or at all. And I think we should start with that kind of message. You know, that we're all united, we all want the same thing. And use that to distribute the message through social media and things like that, because again it's like cost effective
and thinking win-win. We've got to think in terms of win-win and synergy.
And I know people don't like to talk about this. I mean, I think even between the different social classes, like, we all have to think win-win. And to my audience in the U.S., I know some of you are Filipinos living and working abroad, and some of you are Philams who are interested in your country. I think if you want, you should, you know, try and come back here every now and then, try and do something to change. You know, I'm gonna think more about concrete things people can do, but that's where it starts, because the government and policies and all this, those are institutions. Those are all made up of human beings, right? All these things are made up of human beings. So we tend to focus. I don't know. At least for me, like a sound bites tend to focus a lot on policies and numbers, but behind that are human beings. So.
Yeah.
It takes. I mean, a policy or a law is useless if people don't follow it or it's not being executed correctly. So and then it would be great too if the Philippines was the first country in history to reform itself and its society through social media.
That'll be a first.
I mean, it would be, but I mean that's we're in the 21st century and we have to make use of these technologies. Before I forget, what is a way that politicians or people want to run for public office can run without spending lots of money and being indebted to
Well,
social media?
Social media, I think, is the way to go.
Yeah, I mean, theoretically you'd be indebted to Facebook though, but Facebook isn't involved in local politics here, at least.
And Facebook has gotten its rewards in terms of shareholder value.
Yeah, and I think,
And dividends.
So if we're gonna do the social media thing, I think everyone has to be. I know there's a podcast about the Philippines, Manila, but we should also be cognizant of events that happen elsewhere in the world. I mean, currently and historically, because and also like seeing how global society sort of is going to regulate Facebook, or Twitter in a way that's because there has to be a way like I mean anyway, it's something I want to follow. I think everyone should follow because anyone who uses any of these platforms should at least follow the news of basically what's going on with Twitter and Facebook and YouTube, etc., etc. Because those are the big global monopolies of our day.
Yeah.
And
It's a mysterious monopoly because it's a monopoly, yet everyone partakes of it.
yes, yeah,
It's pretty much, I'd say, in the United States, I'll compare it to what happened. The biggest 90%, 80% of the geographical territory of the United States is covered by electric cooperatives
yes,
and telephone cooperatives.
right,
And the state-of-the-art cutting-edge technologies are there.
yeah,
And the reason why they are able to do that is because they're able to capture what we would call the economic rents,
yes,
the
yes,
synergies that these monopolies form, and distribute it equitably among its members.
yeah,
And I think that would be another economic model to explore,
it's interesting.
the cooperative model,
Okay,
in which it can recover the economic rents and keep it social and equitable in distribution, and returning the Commonwealth back to its sources of nature
okay,
and society's cooperation.
okay,
Because that's the key. Enhance the source of your wealth, and
Yeah.
your wealth will grow.
yeah, yeah,
Treat it unfairly, and you will grow unfairly.
yeah,
You might even shrink.
yeah, yeah. Interesting. So, yeah. Anything else you want to add?
Well, I think that's a pretty good
Yeah.
ending for now.
Yeah,
We
I
can
think we talked like a good hour, so
Yeah.
that's great. Before I forget, let's see. Today's Spanish Tagalog vocab is, let's see, tax in Spanish. I think it's impuesto. Yeah, impuesto. El impuesto. What's tax in Tagalog? Is it singit?
Buwis.
Buwis impuesto. El impuesto because el is a masculine noun. So in Spanish we have genders. So there's el feminine and masculine. So impuesto is el impuesto. Or los impuestos for plural. Buwis or mga buwis in Tagalog.
Ang buwis.
Ang buwis, mga buwis, el impuesto, los impuestos. Okay, thank you very much, Joffre.
My pleasure. Rodrigo.
Do you want to like leave a link, or maybe I'll put it in the show notes or the description?
You can show them a link to the Association for Good Government, www.associationforgoodgov.com.au.
Okay.
It's an arcane designed website, but I'll be updating it this year
Perfect.
over time.
So, Association of Good Governance.
For good
sorry,
government.
Association for
Good government.
Good Governance. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. I will see everyone next week. Hopefully, I get more guests. Hopefully, you can come in, drop by every now and then when you're in town, when you're visiting from Australia.
Yep.
Keep us updated. I too want to launch a kind of, like I was telling my viewers, is I want to launch some kind of civic reform movement. So you give me plenty of ideas. Maybe we can talk more.
Yes.
You know, and I want it to be something that everyone in society can really take part of. And I want to start with like the educated classes, basically. I think for me that's a way to start.
Yeah.
And educated, and that covers a wide range of income levels. So
And let them provide the example
yeah, exactly.
that society starves for.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, that's it. Anyways, you can center. Sorry.
Association for Good Government.
For good government.
If you Google it, you'll find it. It's quite easy.
Association for Good Government.
Association for Good Government.
All right. So we'll see you next week then. Take care.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
thank you.
Ingat.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Oh, gonna stop right here.